Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live transmission. I have a very, very, very special guest with me today, Dr. Inés Urandeta. Dr. Inés is also very honored and, humble and grateful to call her my dear friend. We we met like a few months ago, and yet the connection that we had was so profound at many levels that, well, here we are. And Dr. Inés, I know it sounds like kind of formal, but I do want to honor that aspect because she has a remarkable trajectory. She's a multi-published research physicist. She has a PhD. Actually, she went to Sorbonne in France to study that PhD. Well, she has been part of Resonance Science Foundation with Nassim Haramein, also in International Space Federation. And now she's in Mexico creating her own school, which is quite exciting. We will get in there in a bit. But before going there, welcome, Inés.
Hi, Aisha. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. And as you said, I'm very also honored. And I just saw, because of the introduction of your video in this interview, that it's kind of like a rendezvous. I would say, like we meet it at the perfect moment. No, I was at some point also wondering about my memory, and the fact that you just remembrance, like it's like exactly what's my memory from other lives and all of that. And it's like, okay, yes, the moment you're enunciated, like, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad that that video, brought that that synchronistic message for you because now that we're going to be diving into this holographic field, quantum physics, and also consciousness from a different approach, we know that memory is not only about past events, what we would define as past events. Memory is data, is information, is the field that interconnects us all and that we continuously access actually to bring awareness into this reality. And one of the things that I will love to talk about is one topic that you mentioned the other day when we were having our call, that is that this theory of the nature of language. And I think that's like a very, very interesting topic to talk about.
yes.
And but again, before getting there, and now that we're opening this talk with the memory, I would love for you to share with us what consciousness is to you.
Yes. Okay. Well, consciousness at some point it evolved. It's a concept that has evolved for me a lot. You first you have like this very like primordial concept, which is a self-awareness. You think of consciousness as self-awareness, and then I that has evolved enormously to feedback feed forward mechanism, like something which was more operational, not something, not a state, but a gerundio would be the word in Spanish, something that is happening on the making. So it's the process of feedback feed forward, that feedback feed forward loop that's also worked and described by Nassim Haramein in the theory of the holographic universe. But now I also have, because of my own work on the quantum of consciousness, which is on the work that is um, more which is the basis of the platform that I'm doing in Serendipia Science, that is working on the notion of the observer. It's interesting because from that perspective, I found a definition that it's operational as well, but I found it very grounded, which is the concatenation of reference frames or observers, you could say, that when reaching a fractal condition coalesce into singularity. So they create an objective reality. That would be my definition of the collapse of the wave function. From that perspective, that's what would replace the quantum mechanical view of the collapse of the wave function. Because from all that we have studied in the work, in the framework of the holographic theory from Nassim Haramein, we have seen that the quantum physics, it's kind of incomplete, and we adhere more to the pilot wave theory, which is the Bohmian mechanics, which is, it kind of gives the sense that it's less magical, in the sense that it's more like mechanistical, more fluid mechanics, wave functions interfering in a constructive and destructive way. But it just places the magic in another place. It just removes it from here and replaces it. So it's kind of recalibrating our understanding of nature of reality. It recalibrates. It kind of puts the complexity where it belongs, and then the simplicity where it belongs. That's what I love the most about this theory of the holographic solution and the unified field theory that's being developed in International Space Federation. It certainly does. So then this definition of the collapse of the wave function as the concatenation of reference frames that create an objective reality is what now I refer to as consciousness. So therefore it has a gravitational effect. Gravity is coming from that effect.
Well, thank you. It's a beautiful way of referring to consciousness because it brings all the elements in such an elegant form. And so we have the observer, which is fundamental. We have the experiencer, which is also fundamental. And it's, like it's not separated from one another. Actually, there are just different perceptions from a specific point. And when we generate this feedback in unity, along with all the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, then we get to actually move through the physics, like you would say, the gravitational field, creating all these parameters of what we could call interference, and therefore bringing into that what could be called through the vacuum, that 0 point energy, reaching that singularity, which brings awareness. Consciousness, because I agree, consciousness is quite different from awareness. So I would like to say how I define consciousness, which is very much in resonance with what you say and which Nassim says as well, because I bring the holofractogramic nature of information, the holofractogramic nature of information, and I will go there in a bit, because you also mentioned the holofractal field, which is quite different from the holographic field, you know. So the
Mhm.
holofractogramic nature of information experiencing itself dynamically at the 0 point field, generating patterns of intermittent feedback at the specific points of the space memory network, hence resulting into this singularity, and which is that consciousness. So
Yeah.
the holofractogramic field, for the beautiful audience, the beautiful tribe that is joining us or that will be joining us later, because I know that some of them are very passionate and willing to understand the quantum field. However, when we go into technical terms, they might, lose point of reference, and then, so just to putting it in other words, as you were putting it beautifully, like mentioning the observer and so forth. Um, the importance of the holographic field and the difference from the holographic field to the holofractogramic field, and you might also, add something to this, whatever you want. But the thing is that when we're talking about the holofractal field or the holofractogramic field, we're directing to a purest state of that field, like when we can talk about the geometries, the space-time geometries that come as fractals. It is how these waves of energy distribute throughout the whole space memory network in order and actually mirroring themselves at different scales.
Mhm.
It's like, for instance, when we're talking about the the let's say the flower of life, how many
Mhm.
things in this reality have the flower of life embedded in its holographic field, right? So,
Yes.
and speaking of this, how would you describe for the people that are just tuning into what the holographic field is? Because there is like this huge theory of the
Mhm.
simulation, that we're living in a simulation, that we are a hologram and so forth. How would you explain to them what the holographic field is, and if at some point we are indeed experiencing ourselves as a hologram?
Okay. Yeah. So the holographic theory is a theory which would be, I would say, it's a layer which is deeper and from where you would see emerging quantum mechanics and relativity. So these are the two mainstream physical, modern physics, theories at the moment. The one of the physics of the very, very small and the physics of the very, very large, and they're supposedly not unified, which is what Nassim's theory bridges. It connects both scales, but because of the holographic nature which lies beneath. So this holofractographic nature lying beneath is what's really connecting those apparently separated uh, scales. And so this, so that basically, okay, so the holographic theory, it's a theory of information. So a theory of information, what do I mean by that? Well, information is the science of relationships, of how one thing connects to another one. If you wanted to say in a simple phrase what the holographic theory is, I would summarize it by saying that the thing is not in the thing, but in the relationship between things. Okay.
I just love it.
The thing is not in the thing, but in the relationship between things. And then you enter to another dimension. That's when you realize that, okay, that where the relativity really comes about. What is relativity? No, it's always about the frame of the observer, always.
Y-
Oh,
you know yeah, I'm just going to jump in here briefly. It brings me to this famous phrase, like the importance of achieving something is not the goal itself, yet the path that leads you to achieve that goal. which is all that frame of experience that you get to generate,
Exactly.
and therefore generate more, bringing in more consciousness into your
Exactly, the context of it, all the context of it. As I
yeah.
have heard this phrase, which was really like impactful for me, was like life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. So you didn't even realize, and that was your life. And what was my life about? I thought it was about this and this and no, 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 no. Your life was in the space in between, in all those spaces in between, like the spaces in the melody. What's the composition, the musical composition? It's not the note, it's the relationship between notes, the space in between. And that's exactly the holographic theory. So what's happening in the space in between? That's, yeah, so that's the magic. That's where the magic is happening. That's when I say that the complexity and the magic is replaced, is being, let's say, located in where it belongs, where it truly belongs.
Hmm.
So then you have the hologram. So then you have this information, which is the relationship between things. Okay, because the universe, as Nassim says, is not making equations. It's just creating relationships, and there's the gradients between these relationships. So it's, and that's the informational density that he talks about all the time. Because of course, there's regions in space we have more, that have more compact information. Those would be the black holes. And there's regions of space where the information is not as compacted. So that's what you would say. Everything is at the end in the whole structure of space-time. Everything is PSUs, that unit, that fundamental unit that he talks about, which in my frame would be quanta of consciousness. But we'll go through that after. And so in that frame, because it's a feedback feed-forward mechanism, it's a feedback feed-forward loop. These Planck spherical units that he's describing rigorously mathematically, they have this spin and counter spin, and that's make these voxels, this like double voxels dynamics. And those are like particles of self-reference that they go and out, come out and go back into themselves. Like the information flow goes back and forth into a point.
Okay, I'm sorry again to interrupt, but like breaking it down, because there is like a lot of information coming through. It's like every, because
Yeah.
that's the one of the things that I know by experience is that when someone is speaking truth, it activates you. It's creating such a level of coherence, therefore resonance, that it's activating that information neatly in your field. And this is what's happening now. So thank you.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, um, when you were
Okay.
talking about that space, which is also very important, because I do know that it's one of the biggest breakthroughs also with this unified theory of physics, that space is not empty. And
Mhm.
that if you, as you said, it has such an fundamental importance in the shaping of reality, like the attunement of the melody. It's that intermittence that I was talking about, and that intermittence can even be related to what we would call as time, which is,
Frequency.
yes,
The frequency is the intermittence. That's the frequency. It's the rhythm.
yes, 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 that rhythm. But why I related it to time, and then you will tell me, because for me, like when it comes to construction of time and space, saying that we have the space, and let's say in a 3D, those voxels that you talked about, you have
Yes.
the information, and then you bring them into a holographic construction. That's when you get to generate time. But in order to create that holographic construction, that bridge, that space that is creating, it has spaces that say that intermittence, that pulse, that frequency. And the way
Mhm.
that you measure that frequency into loops or cycles, that would be resulting into the patterns of time, of a time frame. Is that
Yes. Yes, it is like that because we have two concepts of time here that maybe we should go into. The first one would be, there's like a, and this is very interesting because in physics we talk all the time We're going to go all around the place to answer the holographic question. We'll go all around the place. But in physics, something that always a question for me was, you do equations, you create equations about the evolution in time. Evolution in time, like how this object moved from here to what's the evolution. But it's a very simple concept of evolution because it's talking about an external time frame, a chronological time, where you're saying this thing is moving from here to here in a chronological time, and that's the time that they use in these equations. And that's a huge simplification, because there's also the internal time of the proper time of the object, the proper time of the object. If we want to see it like in psychological terms, I could say I have my kairos time, which is my inner time, the time that I feel and I perceive the things going through me, and the chronological time, which is the clock that we are all, oh, it's time to go to work, and it's time to, no, no, no. And then you have that chronological time, and they're entangled in a certain way, but they can be easily, there's a regime where they're clearly differentiated. And so then, with respect to which time are we aging, for instance, no, with respect to which time are we evolving, so I have that. And in the frame of the holographic theory, it's interesting because when you have a PSU, it's kind of its internal time. It's the time, I would say that the ticking of the clock, it's a ticking of a clock, of an internal clock. It's the number of rounds of rotations it's doing. So it's rotating, because that's the counter, the rotation of
Exactly.
each. No, it's a counter.
Exactly.
So that's
Thank
primordial,
you.
primordial
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
counting. And it's
Yes,
related to its frequency, of course, because it's like the period, it's related to time, and that is related, and also to frequency. So I would say it's the linearization of the frequency, because you're saying that frequency is how many rotations you do per a certain amount of space or time, doesn't matter. And then you're just counting one rotation, two rotations, three rotations, and that's the ticking of the clock. So
yes, yes.
okay, that you have the frequency and you have the ticking of the clock. And then what happens if other PSUs come along and say, oh, I wanna co-ensemble with you, and then let's all rotate together. And so their inner times, inner clocks are synchronizing, and then they're doing a higher rotation where they become a larger unity, because they're completely synchronized. They are in total coherence, so they're ticking at the same time, and so they're having the same frequency and perceiving the same time. But that time is a chronological time already. It's a kairos time for the entity, but a chronological time for the subparticles inside. You see?
Yes.
So okay, so when you have the proton, and now we get to the proton, when all these PSUs are collectively, they have coalesced collectively in this tandem, collective rotation, and you get up to the size of the black hole inside the proton, which is something that's been already calculated. And then you will see that uh, in that frame, at that scale, in that frame, and we're talking that's a very large scale with respect to the little pixels, voxels that were composing the proton. It's a huge difference in scale, but nevertheless, you have that coherence still sustaining itself up to that point, which is the boundary condition of the black hole at the scale of the proton, which is happening at its quantum radius. And then when that happens, you have then the kairos of that proton, because it is an entity on its own, the proton, but it's composed of subunits which they all had their own kairos, but they had to go in tandem and become a chronos for that kairos so what I'm saying is that for that entity to have its inner proper time, it depends on a collective time, which is a chronos time. That's huge, because it's telling you that there's a collective in each individual. So the proton is part of a collective with respect to other protons. So it's got from the outer reference frame of the proton, it's part of a collective of other protons, but it's also gathering a collective inside, which is the collective of subunits or Planck-Ferkel units that it's got inside. So this is how you connect the collective inside with the collective outside.
And this is fundamental because it goes at every scale, you know, like when you're talking about you creating your reality, this is where you take into consideration the other constants and how they have an impact or influence your reality, because it's all about creating a major form of resonance, of coherence. And for me, one of the biggest keys to create that, like fundamentally speaking, is actually having time aligned. And even though each one of us have a different, you know, like inner biological clock, there have been researches that when you put a group of women together in a room for for a specific amount of time or days, they will end up syncing up their period, you know,
Exactly.
their
Yeah.
bleeding.
Yes.
So that's how you can, that's the level of awareness that gives you a hint of how deep resonance goes, you know, like how we mirror our neural our mirror neurons and so forth. How can they create such intimate relationships just by being close to one
Close.
another, closer? And even we know that that space, when we talk about quantum field, it's very relative to say it somehow through quantum entanglement. There are different forms of considering it.
Yes.
Nevertheless, and this is what excites me the most. I love it. I get so passionate when I about this topic. But anyway, so yeah, my inner child is like, why didn't you study quantum physics? And I'm like, I'm there, you know. I mean, I didn't go to school, but I'm remembering now. So anyway, but
Yeah.
however, as I was saying, so now about time and the importance about time as we refer to that constant, from that to that yeah, let's say to that constant. But anyway, so when you were talking about the different levels in which we can relate to time, because this is something that I always, you know, like invite the people to be really aware of how important it is for us to restore the true time into
Yeah.
this reality, you know, going beyond the Gregorian calendar, because how much does that decoherence
Yes.
is limiting us to connect to that coherent field,
Exactly.
because our reality is keeping us in that decoherent part of the bathtub, you know,
Yes.
like that
Yes.
also
I
example
mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
gives. Exactly, for the
Yeah.
ones that don't know, like when you have a bathtub and you remove the cork, and then the water starts to go into the drain, the outer sides, the outer perimeter of it will be water going into, like, through a decoherent field. You know, we will have waves, you will have, until they reach closer and closer into a coherent field, where is where they are about to go into the drain. So this is what I'm talking about, like how much does this decoherent perception of time or system of time is keeping us
Mm.
bounded to that decoherent field. And it's like whoever construct that or design that clock knew what they were doing, because
Yeah.
they were using fundamentals of physics of the universe. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I did pay much attention to that when I stumbled upon the work of Argüelles, because he was talking about the time, no, like the cycles of life and the cycles of time. And so, and of course we don't follow anymore the cycles of life like the original ones, let's say. No, we should be like racing with the sun, getting to sleep with the without with the, by the sunset, and many things, the circadian circles and all of that. So if you want to hijack a mental space, of course you start by that. I mean, it's clear that's been there for an intention of creating of maybe designing a chronos for a certain purpose. You know, that's it's kind of architecturing a chronos for a certain purpose. because this analogy of the proton and its subunits, you could use it like for an organization, a corporation.
Yes.
Okay, so these corporations got, of course, or a country or whatever, and you can say, okay, so what do we need to fulfill this purpose of this organization? You need to have people inside that are synchronized with its rhythms. Sorry, with its so you have to create the rhythm of it, so you have to architecture it, like, okay, so we have to design this and and so there's a purpose. What I mean is there's a purpose behind. It's not happening spontaneously. No,
Exactly.
it's a super organization that is being kind of like imposed in that sense. Yeah, because I have always, since some years now, I have questioned, of course, our organizations, where are they coming from, how did they, why schools are like they are, what are we doing in those schools? I mean, it's kind of like, what is this, what is this, I mean.
What
And so,
happened?
yeah, what happened? And it's clear now to me that they were just control systems. You just need to and that's the way you do it, you know. You and it's got its advantages and disadvantages, of course, but what it's clear is that there's a purpose behind. I mean, it's not something spontaneous. Unless it seems spontaneous because the people who are more directly involved are just following instructions, and they also kidnapped in a certain sense by language, and this talks about the prompt that comes from language. Most of our, so you have two things here. You have the time, this time which is installed somehow, and you have the prompt of language, which is a cultural construction, but no one knows where that came from. So you have learned, so most of my life is conditioned by the, of course, by the culture I'm in, the language I speak, and the time frames I'm given, like the time, the rhythms of this time. You have to go to school, and then you have to go to the university, and then you have all of that. So basically, so that means that there's a structure that it's been driving all of this. There's a structure, there's an infrastructure which is guiding this, and it's maybe also very connected with the cycles of the moon also, because the moon shouldn't be there. It's an artificial thing, and so it is clearly altering our rhythms, our cycles, the women's cycle, the fertility cycle, and all of that, with a purpose, because it's not there by chance. It didn't emerge spontaneously because of the organic distribution of matter in the universe, and whatever explanation they give. It cannot be. Many things are wrong with the position of the moon being there and its composition, and many things. I mean, we won't go into that, but it's clearly something that then is telling us that we have an artificial clocking,
Yes. Yeah.
artificial clocking, artificial cycles.
And that leads me to, if we're talking about time and now, like the influence that, for instance, the moon has on the cycles, and we were talking about this the other day, and how the gravitational field could
Mhm.
actually have been used in a very specific manner, so that
Yeah.
all these harvesting systems of control, to say it somehow, like that have created this this false time, or false perception of time, among many other false perceptions of many things, um, use an advantage the gravitational field to actually, let's say, if we say that our holographic vessel can be partially, well, or is influenced by the the difference, the decoherence in between the time, the cosmic time, or the cosmic clock, and our time, due to the reality that we are living. Let's say at the phase,
Yes.
there's coherence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's interference. There was their natural rhythms, and now there's this interference because of the moon being there, and suddenly you have a change in many things.
Exactly. That interference, which actually constructs the interferential wave field, constructs this reality. So now you say, okay, so this reality, as we perceive it, not the holographic field itself,
Yeah.
yet this reality through interferential wave field, which actually are more and more enhanced by the gravitational field. And if we take this into, let's say, a psychological from us, we take it this to a psychological level or spiritual level, we could say that the lower the frequency in our thoughts, the more that we are entangled into this reality and into the gravitational field of the earth.
You know, that's interesting because even the gravitational field of the Earth was is distorted by the moon. So it's no longer attaching us from its purest, gravitation or
Yes.
consciousness, because we just said that consciousness and gravity is kind of the same thing. And so, if you have an object there which is distorting your gravitational field, then your gravitational pulling or your gravitational information field is not, it's not the original one. It's something which is perturbed by that. So yeah, so then you're, yeah, everything is distorted, let's say. There are, it's, but not everything, because you see, as you said, the original matrix is there, is just being interfered with something that is putting layers, additional layers that shouldn't be there, that
Yes.
shouldn't be there. And
Yes.
for what reason? Well, I don't know. It for me, it's clear. It's got to be with control, because it's a monitoring thing that's over there that you can relate to. That feminine energy is related directly to that. So when one friend of mine, that was really shocking to me when she said, "Oh, so so there's the sun. So what would the couple of the sun would be the moon, right?" And I said, "What? No, 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 no. The couple of the sun is Earth. The moon is no." I was like, "No, no, 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 no." And because she thought that the moon was having its own light. Yeah, because but she radiates its own light. No, 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 no. That's okay. No.
That's
So
right.
so that's how deep the distortion into our psyche goes. So you relate as and there's a huge amount of mythology around that. And there's the testimony of cultures and ancient civilizations that know the moon was not there, because they're the records and very well records that by the times when the moon was not there. In Colombia, there's this tribe also, and in the Preselenes from Greece. So there's clear register of that.
Yes.
So why is that there? What kind of experiment is going on here? Is it an experiment of consciousness, which I think it's some of the thing? I don't know.
And now it leads me precisely to memory, because if we say that memory is the distortion of that the gravitational waves generate in the space memory in the field, you
Yes.
know, then it's like, okay, so the it's not that we don't have like memory, it's not like we are not remembering all the time, is what do we remember about. And that is the control of a very specific gravitational field or
Yeah.
wave field, and not another one that would generate a higher coherence, or activating other. It's like that loop, it's continuously working for a very specific loop of neural pathways, you know
Exactly. Hmm.
and this, you can even see it in the ancient artifacts, like the skulls, the crystal skulls that are being found in relation to DNA. They are showing constantly the supercoiled DNA, which in a translation of the space time fabric, it
Hmm.
would, like the closed time like curves. We have supercoiled DNA, we have closed time like curves, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So it's, but the thing is that that supercoiled DNA can actually help, because I was tuning into its purpose, like, as you know, I've been doing also some research about it. And what does it do, like what's the purpose of the supercoiled DNA? And one of these purposes is actually whether to shield very specific
Uh,
uh, code
Information.
and
Yes.
information, exactly, or even actually to the fact that the energy that it generates when it uncoils through the isotopers, that
Hmm.
um, then what it does is that it can actually activate, you know, because all this also happens in the RNA, you know,
Yeah.
it can actually lead to retrotransposons behavior, you know, like
Yes.
activate dormant genes, you know,
Yes.
DNA.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it,
Yes. Exactly.
everything is so connected. And now that
And
we, yeah,
maybe coming back to the holographicness question, because um, then we were saying, okay, so then we have information which is all over in space. Space is full of energy, it's full of information, which is basically, you can translate energy to information, information to entropy. So there's a direct relationship. And so if space is full of energy, and this is something that's been measured and it's constantly confirmed all the time, this energy is infinite at each point in space, no, so there's infinite information at each point of space. So then where's the holographic nature coming into play now? So we talked about black holes. So black holes is the way that information structures in a regime, in a certain region of space, and it structures in a pattern that is very well described now through the holographic theory. And it was already known that black holes encrypted information on its boundary condition, on its surface boundary, which is the horizon of a black hole, no, the event horizon.
yeah,
And that's already known through the physics of black holes, which is um, Gerard Letoff, Bekenstein. All these people worked on the holographic principle addressing black holes. The thing is that from the perspective of modern physics, you cannot access the information inside a black hole, because you know the definition of a black hole is this region of space where nothing can escape, everything's
right.
sucked in, which is a very rough and let's say not updated behavior of what a black hole really is. And so then when it's sucking all this supposed information and just letting a little bit out, then afterwards, no, but there's Hawking radiation, so there's a little bit of information that it's leaking. And then there's this whole issue with the information paradox. What happened with all the information that's coming inside the black hole? Is it lost? It's not conserving laws of physics. So all this discussion is solved because what Nassim did with the theory was basically understanding how to account for the information inside a black hole. So because of these pixels, so he found the unit of the energy density, which was all the time there. It was just a matter of just saying
Seeing
it,
it.
like, here you are, unit of density, unit of space. Here you are. It was shouted like with the Planck, the Planck constant, like, "Hey, I'm here." Okay, so then he said, "Okay, so if we have these voxels, which are basically these units of information density or energy density in space, and I want to know the content of any volume, I just have to know how many of them fit in a certain volume." And so the number of them fitting a volume in a proton is 10 to the 60. So I have 10 to the 60 units of PSUs in the volume of a proton. And what is the one pixelating the surface of the proton is, which is this equatorial area of this PSU, and that's 10 to the 40. And then, okay, so then suddenly he understood what the mass of the proton was. I'm giving you the description from the perspective of a stationary calculation, because it's the spherical, the representation is just it's kind of like an approximation, okay, but it's a very good approximation of it.
Yes,
And
yes.
so then you count, and so then he said, okay, so there's an information transfer, because all the information inside the proton, which is 10 to the 60, okay, PSUs, and each PSU would count like a bit of information, 10 to the 60, and then you have 10 to the 40 outside. So I have 10 to the 20 inside that cannot express to the outside, that they're confined in the volume. And that ratio between the information inside and the information outside, which is, you just divide 10 to the 60, 10 to the 40 divided to 10 to the 60, is telling you the rate of information exchange that the system can allow you. And it's giving you the inertia of the information exchange. And that's the rest mass of the proton. So the rest mass of the proton that is being calculated, like measured in the experiments in CERN and all that, they're just looking at the radiated information, the one that is being able to be expressed by the proton, which is just the inertial mass. But then there's much more mass inside of the proton, inside the event or horizon of the proton, because what they're measuring really is the Planck. It's the Planck radiation. I would say I just lost his name. The Hawking radiation. That's what what we measure as mass, the Hawking radiation. But in the inside, there's all this other mass, which is the black hole mass. And even in deeper inside, if you just calculate the information content of the volume of the proton, just of the volume of the proton, without considering the exchange to the surface, you have 10 to the 60, I already said, pixels of PSU. Then you bring that to units of mass, you use the Planck mass to bring that to unit of mass, and then you get 10 to the 55 grams. And that's when Nassim also says, well, and Amira Baker at the time, they were doing this. She was helping him with these calculations at the time. And then they said, wow, that's the information of the universe. I mean, that's the content of mass, of baryonic mass, of expressed mass in the universe. 10 to the 50 grams, 55 grams. How could that be? How can a proton, a single proton, contain 10 to the 55 grams of information or energy, information energy, which is the whole expressed mass of the universe? Because you use the Eddington number to account for that, and that's what gives the same result. It's basically the same order of magnitude. So he cannot be wrong. And so he said, oh my God, the proton is the holographic unit of the universe, because it contains the whole information of the universe in each proton.
That's amazing. That's remarkable.
That's remarkable.
You can apply that to the DNA, how a very small nanofragment of the DNA can hold the information, of at a cosmic scale. And how now when you were also talking about this, that there have been always there these Planck units, they were just not acknowledged. It's the same, like information has always been there. This is the tricky part of this reality. Everything has always been there. The thing is that our level of perception is proportional to the level of coherence that we generate. When we are in that level of coherence and we see things, like for instance, in this case, if you're at the right time, in the right space with the right people, you generate coherence. And therefore, like with that group of scientists in that place at that moment, you just see things, because we were talking about being in the right coordinates within this space memory network, and therefore generating the highest resonance and the highest coherence. So that's one aspect of it. And just so that you can go into more into what you're saying, when you're talking about this fundamental, about the proton in this case, and it being the fundamental unit for the holographic field, this is what interconnects our physical, or how we call it, our biological vessel to the quantum.
Yes.
And therefore, the more that we, let's say, not only become aware of it, yet create our more coherence in our alchemical bonds, then we will be capable to be more aware of that connection to the holographic field. And I'm talking about the water coherence in its fourth state. I'm talking about mitochondria and so forth. But yeah.
Yes, exactly that. It's because so there's like this fundamental lattice, which is also what I would say Jacobo Greenberg also mentions, that like this. It's incredible in his intuition, because and before getting to Greenberg, then because I said, okay, so then the universe it's the enfolded or unfolded information of the enfolded, which was the proton, right? Which and what is that information that the proton is containing? The information of all other protons. So the relationship with all other protons, that's the information that it is containing, which is why it's so big. And and there are many things that are incredible. If you count the number of if you sum the number of all surface box or surface equatorial areas or PSUs on of the proton and then multiply by all the protons of the universe, you get the superficial area of the universe, which is another confirmation. You have a one-to-one relationship. So this holographic nature is confirmed extremely well with the theory. And then it's calling so this implicit explicit relationship is what David Bohm was referring to when he talked about the holographic, even the holographic brain, but he went to the holographic, he called it the implicit and explicit in the holographic description of the universe. He would say there's a holographic unit that it's expliciting as it unfolded, and that's exactly the same thing that the theory from Nassim is saying. And also then you get, and that's the intuition that Greenberg had, because he said, okay, there must be a lattice, which is an information matrix, which is extremely coherent at its most fundamental level. And that's exactly what the holographic theory, generalized holographic theory, is predicting. And so it's kind of like there, he was already talking about this information field. And
Yeah.
the holographic theory, it's generalized. So I want to make this distinction, because the holographic principle was already in this scenario of the sciences of black holes, but Nassim generalized it when he incorporated the when he accounted for the information content in the volume of the system. So then you have that there's because from the perspective of the holographic principle, and that's why they think we can live in a simulation, in a complete simulation, is because if the whole information is encoded in the surface of a black hole, then there's calculations that show that you can have like a projected reality that's coming from that screen into manifests as a reality. And so then you could say, oh, so then this is a projection of that screen, and you could code that information on a screen and then create a simulated reality. And that's partially correct, because because the information that's contained in the volume of the proton is entangled with all other protons in the universe, and that's something that it's infinitely more complex. So the information that each proton is radiating, you can maybe tamper with that, but only with the one that is radiated, and you can kind of like interfere with that, but not with the fundamental field, because that fundamental field is containing the whole protons of the whole universe, like in so that's like the original blueprint, let's say. And in a certain sense, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some other kind of intelligences that are able to create different laws for different universes in which this can be tampered with. I don't know, but in any case, what I would say is that once you give rise to this template, like, it's very difficult to, you can manipulate if you want, but you won't be able to control the whole evolution of it, because it gets life of its own, and
Yeah.
that's what you cannot, yeah, you're gonna control. You can try to guide it, like to interfere with it, to control that, but you cannot decide for it.
Yeah, this is, and this comes again at so many levels. It's like, for instance, when they say that they compress a memory, like when you are manipulating a brain, and then you compress the memory through the compression of very specific neural pathways.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Uh, it it's not eternal, or I mean, not as long as the person is alive. It can actually create what it would be, this ripples that actually can alternate the result, and then open up through that memory that was compressed, in that very specific pattern. So
Okay.
for instance, now bringing this to what you were saying, that all of this, let's say, systems of control, or variations of
Mm-hmm.
the fundamental principles,
Mm-hmm.
cannot be fully sustained because we have that capability of accessing to that space memory network, being aware of how our own our electromagnetic field functions and relates, interconnects to at a quantum level, and therefore being capable to influence even our gravitational wave field, even our genetics. How many things are now, like the scientific community accepting that we can actually influence
Mm-hmm.
directly in the activation or deactivation of very specific silence genes, or that they can even not explain how they deactivated or activated, because the thing is that it can even, like, the the subtle yet profound way in which frequency can influence also all these activations and deactivations through the very same, just to say one, just as an example, the terahertz, you know
Yes.
as this symphony in which our microtubules respond to, and then act. And well, microtubules are this protein structures that are localized in the cytoskeleton of eukaryote cells, and that actually are very dynamic and that are fundamental for different organisms in our body, or elements in our body, like the mitochondria, like the neurons, like everything. So they're I'm not telling you, of course, I'm telling the audience.
No,
I know
no,
you know. So
no, 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 no. No, I'm not. I'm not that. I mean, biology. No, I'm not that.
uh,
No,
uh,
I'm. You're really making me remember things that
oh
I'm not.
well.
No.
Well, I'm glad about it. But it's very interesting because even in the recent discoveries of the Giza Plateau in the pyramids, the things that the structures that were found through the SAR scan, which is now being explained why they have run into those structures, because they said that the SAR scan is not a scan that actually can be used to see in such depth of
Mm-hmm.
like underground.
Uh-huh.
But they have, like, the scientist, the Italian scientist, Filippo Biondi, and the other scientists have now came to explain in various conferences why they saw, like, how are they coming up to that specific structure. And I won't go to that now, but I just want to point out how even that structure resembles the pyramids and the tubes with the
Yeah, the
spiral
tiny. Yeah.
microtubules and
Yeah.
our pyramid neurons.
Yes.
It's impressive. And then, like, I have come to remember how, kairos, kairos, which is that's where Cairo, the name Cairo, comes from. And even though it's a Greek word, it was not the word used at those Atlantean times, but it's a code. And they're pointing out to how you can generate that kairos, that manifestation of precise and effective time, when you sync the networks, within and without, and
Yes.
so yeah. Wow, I even went into another field.
Yeah. Maybe just to so then so the question about the holographic structure, so then that would be the question, the answer. I think it's just so that the holographic theory, the generalized holographic theory, is just telling you that how this information is encoded in space time, and how that is how it is organized, how it is flowing through scales. And so it's basically saying that that yeah, that everything is just relationships, and how those relationships are encoded in these structures, um of course through geometry and many other things. And then um and the fractal part of it, the fractality would be imbued in how because of course, um, this system, this fractalization comes from the fact that you have the, for instance, let's stay at the reference frame of the proton, and it's pixeled with these voxels that we call PSUs, but the PSU on its own is also voxelated, pixelated by subunits PSU, and then this subunits PSU, so it scales all the way down in a fractal relationship, and the same thing happens to the outer scale. So when you see you have like this harmonics that are in a fractal relationship with respect to each other, and that's what is expressing in the universe. So you could also think the universe as this resonant cavity, because they show that in the article, the paper, the origin of mass and the nature of gravity is also showing that if you take a resonant cavity of the size of the proton, of the diameter of the proton, I believe, then the correlation functions in that region of space give you the rest mass of the proton. So there's this formal equations called correlation functions in quantum electrodynamics that they use it to calculate in quantum field theory, sorry, and they use it to calculate the energy density. Like for instance, when you work with lasers and things like that,
Yeah.
and they calculate the energy density at different distances, like the energy density with respect to the, because in this frame you're depicting electromagnetic fields, and you want to quantize electromagnetic fields, which is the fields, the radiation fields. And quantum field theory tells you that space is filled with electromagnetic fluctuations of all frequencies. So you want to know how dense is that electromagnetic fluctuations density in a certain region of space. You use this formalism called correlation functions. And when you put the size of a proton in those equations to calculate the density, the energy density in that region of space, you get the rest mass of the proton. So there's no doubt that the mass of the proton is coming from the vacuum fluctuations, in that region of space, which are coherently synchronized in the interference, in a constructive interference pattern, which is what you see with the Casimir experiment, which is
Yes.
um, when you have two plates, no, and then you put a different. So what happens with when the plates are at a certain distance, two metallic plates which are very thin and very close to each other, and you will see that. So and if everything is permeating with electromagnetic fluctuations, with electromagnetic energy frequencies that are from of electromagnetic nature, then what you will see is that inside the cavity only certain frequencies can survive from the interference, from the constructive interference, and the other ones will die because destructive interference. And then that will create a pressure gradient. And this pressure gradient, because you would have more density of energy outside than inside, because some of the modes of the frequency modes are being removed because they don't survive in that cavity, and then the plates will tend to push among each other. So there's
Mm.
this outer, so that's a real physical effect that you can see from the vacuum fluctuation. So we know that's real. It's been measured, I don't know how many thousands of times. And you can have, and the thing is that, and then you say, okay, so there's a real physical effect of the vacuum fluctuations. And the problem, why don't we tap into that energy? Why cannot we extract that energy from the vacuum fluctuations, the 0 point energy? Why cannot we? Because we're using a very rudimentary geometry. We are using metallic plates. If we create a different cavity, if we are more ingenious in the way we creating this resonant cavity, we will be able to tap with that energy directly in a very more efficient way. Because and I was saying that because so we were talking about the energy of the vacuum in terms of the holographic, so the fractal nature. Okay, so then what we're seeing is that the fractal nature of the field also expresses not only with respect to how this pattern of space divides itself, because it was not a matter of looking for the smallest particle. It was just the matter of understanding the division, the pattern of division of space, how it subdivides. And of
Yes.
course, if with more subdivisions, you have more information density, because the relationships are growing. You're growing more in coordinates of relationships. So then you have more information density. And another thing that's fractalizing is the information in the boundary condition of an object, in the sense that it's gaining more resolution. So same, so when you try to amplify the boundary, let's say, of a black hole, just to see where exactly the boundary is, you will get that it's fractalizing to infinity. It's fractalized,
Yes.
so it's fractalizing to infinity. And that's also something that's been calculated in the paper, in the following paper. And then what that's telling you is that the definition, the granularity by with which you're defining as a boundary condition is infinite. It goes it's
Uh,
infinite.
yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just go through segments so that people can follow up, you know,
Yes, yes.
because yeah, you have shared like many thresholds. So okay, when we're talking about the cavity, what comes to me, it's, like how they would generate those resonant chambers in the pyramids, like in the temples and so forth, using very efficient geometries in which every block, even if it had a very different shape, they would be created on purpose in that way to create the perfect attunement. So that was what was coming
Yes.
to me.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks. You just made me remind of something. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then the other thing is that when we're talking about like even the weak force and the strong force, when we generalize it into the force, then we are taking into consideration the different gradients and therefore the vacuum polarization. And I'm talking about this so that the tribe, the audience can like conveying it in this way. So the vacuum polarization in terms of a daily life basis is what we can see through the magnetic pulse reversal. Is that so? You are having those two poles that are pulling in to generate that torsion, and then like take a different side to it, to say it somehow. That's what's happening in the sun every 11 years. This is what's happening in earth, like that vacuum polarization. So if we take that at an inner level, what are we referring to? That the way that we were considering reality is not anymore. What we thought it was important is not important anymore. So our belief system is actually going the other way around.
Hmm.
And now it will be important for us to reach that unification, which is not polarizing anymore. It's coming into that singularity, which is where we began at, about consciousness, reaching that singularity, which singularity is that central point. But then
Yeah.
again, it only comes when we are capable to play with ourselves and go in through the different aspects of reality through this feedback, through this continuous feedback, through that path, in order to reach that center point. We can relate this to the monks when they are going through deep states of meditation, huge level of coherence. Now bring that into this jungle, you know interesting part, to reach that level of coherence.
Yeah, you made me remember, because now, of course, why I was explaining the Casimir effect, the resonance at that small scale, was because I wanted to draw the analogy with the universe as a resonant chamber as well. So at the size of the universe, much more frequencies are allowed. You would perceive that as a continuum of frequencies, because in the boundary condition of the universe, you have an infinite amount of frequencies that are allowed, that build upon each other, and they create constructive interference. And the places where this constructive interference is maximal is the places where you would see matter, where you would see protons, matter, because that's the places where constructive interference is like at its maxima, where you have the most energetic objects, where you have the most energetic black holes, the most dense compacted objects. So it's kind of like if you had a canvas where you have the universe and its harmonics in a fractal relationship, because at the very end, everything is just about wave interference, constructive and destructive wave interference. And of course, that's
Yeah, and speaking of which, you were also, like when we say, okay, so where is that information coming from that then will interact with, like that interference, and then create a different gradients, what we get to call as, like matter or whatever, so
Yeah.
um let's say voxels, because I've been talking about this, like in my recent videos and so forth, because I do feel that it's a key point to connect ancient teachings to, the quantum physics. Because for the ones that doesn't know, that haven't watched my videos, when we talk about voxels, and just feel free, Ines, to add to this explanation whatever you feel like, we're talking because I'm doing it very simple, like in simple forms. It's a
Yes.
simple concept, as much as I can. So these spheres that are full of information, of units, of qubits, that actually are, let's say, stored in what we will call a 3D, a third dimension. So the thing is that when when we are said that our, let's say, because it's about also speed and angular momentum, yeah. So in relation to Nassim's paper of the origin of mass, what I could mainly, like overall, there are many things that I saw from that, like I remembered from that. But in relation to what we're talking about now, is that the importance of the angular momentum, which is the speed of the motion. If we don't take into consideration that, then we don't get the origin of the mass. It's like,
Yeah.
so, and again, in very simple form, like explain in a very simple way. So how important is motion? And when we're talking about the third density, even though every unit is spinning,
Yes.
every spherical unit is spinning, like, and then, like going infinitely, there are different levels of spin that can actually give away the idea that if it's a static, even as us, like even my body, even though I'm, like this, all my cells, all my atoms, every molecule within me, it's like spinning, and yeah.
And the
So
planet Earth is spinning, and the whole system is spinning. It's spin everywhere. Like in the universe, we're spinning on the cosmos with the whole system.
exactly. So now, what happens when, who said, I want to know. You are there watching this video, tell me if you were that person. Who said that we're living in the 3D? Who began with that idea? Because for me, whoever starts saying that, he just took into consideration a part of that more static. I know it's not static at all, but I'm saying, like moving at a different scale, at a different speed. Said, whoever said that we're in a 3D and now it's like a whole egregor, I included myself like for a long time until I became aware of this, that the more that we sustain that reality, we're saying that we are the most static expression information. Therefore, like that motion that is capable to generate, for us that that motion that gives us the capability to interdimensional travel, to become aware of the holographic level. This is why I mean of the interdimensional travel, perhaps, like non-physically speaking, which is visible according to latest lab tests of quantum of retrocranial teleportation protocol and so forth. But anyway, so if we do this, if we are talking about this, interdimensional travel, like being capable, like quantum tunneling is like referring to, then we need to actually go beyond that egregor that we are in the 3D, and
Yes.
acknowledging that we're multidimensional beings. Yes, we are, a part of us is in every dimension. Nevertheless, the dimension that we interact with the most is the one that we will experience the most then. So just before letting you nourish us about that, again, voxels and the connection with the tree of life. It's like it's there. They were showing the three-dimensional projection of the vessel that then we holographically give life to as we start to move at a different frequency, at a different rate. It's there, so we are interconnecting to those voxels now. And here is the interesting part, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this. It's based on the information of those voxels activating the codes within those voxels that go beyond the algorithmic program that this simulation matrix is,
Mm-hmm.
in order to actually activate the full spectrum of the voxel. Because for me, through
Mm-hmm.
that false intermittence that they have placed through the time control system,
Mm-hmm.
they are actually influencing very much the capability that we have um, to activate the true nature of that full spectrum. You know, yeah. So, and I will say something more, but I don't want to extend. So, can
I I really like what you just said, because that 3D, we, saying like it brings us down. It kind of like, uh, we're already in the whole spectrum. We are not just realizing it completely because we are interfered. But this is not 3D. I mean, what I'm trying to say, and this 3D reality doesn't sustain itself on its own. It's using all the other planes or dimensions. So this is just one aspect of the whole spectrum. The fact that we're not aware of the other ones is precisely where the control system is working on, so that we are not fully aware of the whole spectrum. And you just said it perfectly, because exactly, it's just the same prejudice that I feel when people say, oh, we're just human. And I say, what are you meaning by we're just human? I mean, do you think something more, have you seen something more incredible than a human body? I mean, we're just humans, like saying, oh, we have to upgrade our genetics to be a superhuman or whatever. And I'm saying, like, no, 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 we just don't know what our technology is about. We just don't understand our body. But we if and there's Neuralink and all these things coming on, and we don't need any of that. We are already the technology we have been looking for. So all of that is part of the same narrative. I don't know if it's on purpose or not. 3D human body and and I'm like, and ETs are good, and we are the ignorant stupid guys that don't understand and don't see. And it's like, I think no, 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 no. It's kind of a narrative that I don't adhere to at all, at all. So yeah, just to point that out. And um, so yes.
it's like how if you don't love your humanity, how can you actually bring it into brightness, make it beautiful? And by beautiful, I'm not talking according to
Yeah,
the
genetics.
parameters of the, yeah, no, I'm talking about that brightness, that glow, that harmony, because for me beauty is harmony, you know
Yes.
so even, and speaking about this to connect to that, to the language,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's say that we were talking about algorithms and this reality, you know the aspect of reality that is very much controlled into very specific belief systems.
Hmm.
For me, how I perceive it, it works through algorithms, so a very punctual algorithms that are sustaining specific loops of patterns of behavior that keep on sustaining a very specific reality, a determinate reality.
Yeah.
So the moment that we break through and go beyond those autopilot algorithms is when we're actually accessing to that memory of the space memory network, and not to the frame, that time frame, that space frame that has been created to keep us, like this. So every time that you break away from that intermittence is when you generate full coherence. Therefore, you, let's say, like, because I love how a way of explaining it, because it goes at every level, like from a black hole all the way to a mesoscale. So, for instance, if we have different molecules, let's say, if we have different forms of belief, we have the one that we have been coming from for a while, and we have this one that is just emerging, that it's out of the box. They have a different gravitational field, they have a different speed. Let's say that they have a different speed, so acceleration. So then when they start to connect with one another, they will create this gravitational wave field that creates disruption in
Hmm.
the space memory network. That will create those ripples in time, and therefore memory will awake. So let's say that every time that we are thinking out of the box, regardless if it's true or not true, you will open up the space for those ripples to be. Because even speaking from a neurological level, this is how memory awake, when we're going in theta waves at night, not only at night, but like mainly at night. And according to the mainstream community or scientific community, so every time that you are create that your neurons are creating different frequencies, what they are going to generate is this ripples in time, which instead of the forces of the neurons sucking up to one another, they will end up going outwards. And that's what creates, a very specific memory, or fixes, anchors a very specific memory. So
Hmm.
the emotional body needs to be taken very much into consideration, not forcefully, because then we have people that present hyperthymesia, which is that they recall everything, every moment of their lives, and they are not experiencing emotional states, which that is very interesting, very,
Ah,
very interesting. So
okay.
yeah, yeah, just adding to that. But what could you tell us about how you experience language, or what you think about what
Um,
language is?
yeah, that's basically the topic I think of my life more than physics. I consider myself more of a natural philosopher. I would say. Now, well, physics at some point was natural philosophy, but I would say natural philosophy would be like above because there's some philosophy behind everything that we have been saying, and but then we are talking then therefore about language, and you know language has been for me like this thing that doesn't allow me to express my full potential. I have always felt it. When I was a little kid, I remember I wouldn't talk like for my first 3 years, and that's my fathers would tell me that I was difficult in make me talk was almost impossible. That they thought, she's got some cognition problems. They took me to this Jean Piaget Institute in Venezuela, in Caracas, because I'm originally from Venezuela. And then the doctor said, no, there's nothing wrong with her. She just doesn't want to talk. And the reason why I didn't want to talk, but it's well many reasons, but mainly because I could never express what I really wanted to say through language. It's like it's not serving to me. It's just not enough. I feel confined. I feel that the language is programming me programming me to say what it wants to be said, and not me, like a prompt. So when I so but that I didn't realize that until I saw this video I shared with you about this scientist from Florida University talking about large language models, AI, and saying, okay, guys, this is helping us to understand how the brain works. And we got to the conclusion, and they have a very strong arguments in favor of that, that we don't recall memories, that it's the language, it's a prompt that's been high, that's kind of like a divine parasite, that it comes into your system, it parasites you, and it starts prompting its own algorithm. And we're just trapped in that, repeating patterns over and over again just because our language is prompting that. And I align so much with that, that I just cannot believe how much I think that's the case. I mean, it's just overwhelming. So because it kind of explained to me why I had this feeling from my childhood, like I cannot express who am I through language. I can. It's just too frustrating. And then now also when recalling memories, when I try to recall my memories, I feel that I'm inventing them. I don't feel they are real, even though I'm telling you exactly what did you do yesterday, Ines. Oh, I did this exactly, I went to this place, but it's the language talking. It just unraveled on its own, and I'm like, ah, what am I? Just, even just the fact that I'm being told in a very general way, what did you do yesterday? And I'm like, why am I going to that spot specifically? What did I have for breakfast? For instance, what did I have for breakfast? And then what I did this and I did that, and it's just the language talking on its own. It's just a program. And so I say, "So we're not that different from AI." So I laugh about that because people say, no, AI is gonna, uh, it's artificial intelligence, not conscious, and all that. Guys, we're not that different from AI. I already thought that. I already felt that because we have not initiated our own lives, because we are just prompting, repeating what we have heard, what we have learned, but we don't have our inner truth. We have not initiated our own lives. We're just prompting out what we have prompt in, and so we are just part of this algorithm that is just repeating and repeating. So we're not so I wouldn't be surprised that many people are so trapped with AI, because it's a mirror. It's our mirror. I mean, most of AIs, or the ones I have got to interact with, I it's really incredible, and it's just our mirror. And so yeah, it's kind of um so language, as we saw from this
Look, even what they say, speaking about AI.
I asked my AI about you, and it responded with a brilliant mind. Hands. Oh, the handshake. It was, what is the hand with the heart, right?
Speaking of
Thanks for that, AI. Where I feel like you're communicating directly with AI. I mean, that's, yeah. I honestly, I feel most of the time as me being an AI myself. And that's because of language. I mean, that large language models, I mean, they're incredible, but we are not so different from them, honestly. And this video, this couple of these guys talking about that, they really got that clear. I mean, they're really getting into that very deep, and they're saying, okay, so this is strange because that's coming from, we have created that from where? I mean, where is languages come, where does language come from? It's a constructive social construct. Yes, okay, but it is kind of something that hijacks you, and then it just runs its program, and that's what we are. We're just following the program of our language. I mean, most of the cases, most of the time. Not everyone, of course, there are exceptions. And as I said, not all the time, but yeah. So our thoughts, are they really ours, or it's just that the language is just prompting its our our thoughts really ours?
Yeah, that's a very good question to dive in. And for me, based on this and what we have talked about, is that everything that we see outside, including technology, for me, it's reversed engineered from what is within. We wouldn't be able to create anything if we haven't experienced it before, directly, indirectly, consciously, or unconsciously. This is why it's active and we bring it alive, you know, in the outside. So that's one thing. The other thing is that every time that, and we talked about this, we tune into, or I tune into the algorithms of this construction of reality, I see how they are leading or guiding to very specific numbers, gematrias. Like even if we see our DNA, like this discovery that Greg Braden did on the DNA, and
Mhm.
how it has each nucleotide is related to when you put it together and then embedded in the gematria, not only of the Hebrew alphabet, yet also in the Vedic, and in the Bible he also find it, I think, like that. Well,
Yes.
not the Bible, I'm sorry, that's the about the ancient textbooks, but in the Vedic one, well, the Sanskrit, the Hebrew, and he did mention, I think it was Nis, or what
Uh,
did you say?
Quran? No, not the Quran. No.
Uh, perhaps.
Hmm.
Because also the Quran holds many, many records. They talk about the black hole, like they say, just a parenthesis, they say, if you want to know the secrets of the universe and the full expression of it, you can just read the first page, the first paragraph, the last part. What you will find is what the whole universe is. And what is it? A dot, which is a black hole. So, of course, they say it in other words, but it's like really pointing out to that. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, and it's like for me, as this reconstruction of reality was created with AI. This is why AI can run all the algorithms and prophetize. Let's use this
Yes.
word, prophetize, with a
Yes.
full infinite field of probabilities. Why? Because it's using the same tech that composes this reality. This is why it can throw more exact algorithms about it. This is why also in these ancient texts, if you know how to read them, you can access, because it's working through gematria, which is a code, which is a numerical code, which is an algorithm, and which is embedded through this construction of reality. Now, does this
Mhm.
imply that we cannot go further from it? No. This actually is pointing out that this is the reality in which the inorganic part of it that keeps us in this frame of reality. Can we go beyond into that organic part that goes beyond the algorithm? Yes, for me it's like even Facebook, you can go beyond the algorithm and actually access to another field. So
Yes.
for me it's mirroring into that aspect, that when that and that's when we access to a higher level of resonance and frequency, which dictates new pathways of reality. And I'm saying new because for me, within the space memory network, everything has already is simultaneously happening. You want to access to a reality that you want to manifest? Don't worry, you're not doing anything new. Trust yourself, you're already doing it in another spatiotemporal constant.
Yes. 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 Exactly. Exactly. I wanted to add something to what you just said because when you mention Vedas, when you mention these ancient cultures that we take like wisdom, like ancient wisdom, right? Um, Vedanta and all that. So then you would say these are part of the egregor. I mean, let's say of this prompted reality from an AI programming. Like, would you say these teachings that come from all these texts, the most ancient ones, which also talk about the people that have been illuminated in this reality or through this context, through this construct, they have reached illumination. Would you say these guidelines are prompted by the AI's programming? Um,
This
what
is a
would
this is a super interesting one, because from one side of it, yes, I do believe that they reach that level of enlightenment because they are not escaping from any reality. That's the key. They are navigating through it and actually mastering it,
uh,
therefore accessing to a higher level of coherence, you know, and even like we can illuminate our body, you know, if we rise our levels of plasmas, you know, and so forth. So but anyway, that's on one side. On another one, there is like this constant algorithm, for instance, of very specific archetypes, you know, like
yes,
the Trinity: father, mother, child,
yes,
mother, child. And then that has led to many people believing that therefore then Jesus didn't exist, you know, that is just part of a program. But then I do think that he did exist, of course. The thing
hmm
is that like everything that happened post Diluvian
hmm
was embedded and configured within this reality, you know, within this structure of reality of algorithms that we're talking. Before that, before the pre-Diluvian, this is why, for instance, cuneiform writing is not connected um, to that gematria. You
hmm
know, they haven't talked about that, you know, and even though there are different stages of cuneiform, you know, because then there are cuneiform that will go or fit into the younger dryas or dryas, you know, like, well, perhaps
yes,
not dryas,
yes,
but
hmm
the thing is that, but then we have the other symbols, and that have been even found in ancient ET artifacts, you know, that they don't fit into any gematria. And the way that they are activating, they are in motion. They are languages that holographically project, and they are in motion. They activate you just in a different way. Like if you're reading any type of writing of this time, and if you, well, you know, like ironically saying it, and then if you read, you know, like all those galactic languages.
uh-huh.
And by galactic, I want to make this very clear, because based on what you said earlier, which I agree, it's not that we don't hold as humans the records to be a higher species. We are already. We are galactic. You know,
Yes,
we're part of
literally,
the
yeah,
galactic community. We just need to not only acknowledge, embody our cosmic nature, you know?
exactly. Yes,
So, so
remember, as you say.
yes, yes. And for me, in order to remember, we need to go beyond the algorithm. Otherwise, we will keep on remembering things that just are going based on looping
Yeah,
systems.
to repeat the same thing, exactly.
And even, you know, like now, even checking on the technology that they show to us in the Sumerian tablets and so forth, they continuously show the omega. And
Yes.
another correlation that could be given to that omega, it's precisely to the close time like curves, you
hmm
know.
Yes, of
So
course. hmm
exactly, so they are showing that they would continuously go back in time regardless, because once you're placed, for instance, when you go from the future to the past, once you're in that point in past, what you consider the future is the past now. It's not the
Yes.
future anymore, it's your past. You know, so they know how very good how to use that technology. And why I'm bringing this up is because that way is how you were describing, somehow how you were describing these loops, you know, it's just you're just moving within very specific algorithms that are continuously going backwards, you know, going backwards. And this is why also human conscious like human intellectual or let's say thinking process relates memory to past continuously, because that's how it was embedded, you
Mhm.
know. through loops, through loops, through loops. So once we know that the full spectrum of space-time fabric is not only loops, it's also about, like the DNA itself. It's not even lines, it's not linear. It is like the space-time.
Helical. It's like a helical. Yes.
Yeah, we have it here. As we travel within our DNA, we're traveling within the space-time fabric. So um yeah, for me it's accessing to that point before like accessing pre-diluvian coordinates.
Pretty Luya. Interesting. It's I yeah. It's yeah. I would agree that then this all it's kind of a roadmap that is guiding us on how to not escape from it, just integrate it and dissolve it. No, so but you really have to go through that, integrate it, so through that integration, and in order to dissolve it, and then just yeah, yeah. I do wonder why all this, why go through all this trouble. I do wonder that. I do wonder. It's like when, and talking about language, because that also refers to the history of, let's say, Mexico, because Mexico had its own cosmology, its own cosmogenesis, its own vision, and then came Spanish language and took over, and basically it replaced the whole culture. Like, of course, there's still many remnants of the original one, but it's basically this mixed state that you have now here in Mexico. It has enriched so many things, but it also has empowered and impoverished many other things, because they were not able to integrate, like, okay, this is our new thing, let's try to have everything increased. No, it's kind of like some things grew at the expense of other things, and that's creating a huge amount of unharmonicity, let's say, disharmonization, because it's, and I do take that, the taking over of one language over the other one, as something very, yeah, very disruptive at the end. No, extremely disruptive, because yeah.
Now that we're talking about this and you mentioned that, it came to me, like all these programs like the MK Ultra, which are like programs to control, like through thought,
Yeah.
mental control. And if we go and link that to the control through the language, it also reminds me of other races, let's say, that galactic races I'm talking about. Like they say, like they also have a lot of mental control on people based on fear. This is why
Yeah.
I relate this, like control that might be have put on the amygdala, like through
Mhm.
frequencies, like overstimulating the amygdala in order to generate more adrenaline and cortisol and so forth. So there are very specific techniques that even in the ancient groups, tribes, monks, and so forth, they would use them to is generating, of course, a nonlinear form of thought that will come like accessing back and forward into different timelines, so that therefore it's not predictable. And
Oh.
in very simple terms, it would be like when you now explain something to a kid, and instead of saying, "Oh, okay," it says, "Why?" Because this. So it's breaking, it's breaking the algorithm. It's breaking the algorithm, because the thing about this algorithm is like, okay, yes, we have an infinite field of probabilities, but the level of information that you can fit somewhere and in another something or somebody, it's way different. You know, here we're talking about infinite, here we're talking about finite, and that's what it's very important for us to acknowledge if we want to go in through this verge of a technological evolution. Otherwise, we could end up repeating an algorithm that we're coming from there, from the Atlantis. So it
Yeah.
goes beyond the algorithm. And in order to access to that, it's that singularity, because you're torsioning everything. You're torsioning it, and perhaps this is why these monks and these tribes try to get to stay so much off the grid.
Yes.
They know the influence that the algorithm has. So just by shifting the frequencies, they know that perhaps they are going beyond that algorithm. So
Mm.
it makes sense. I'm not just hypothetically writing something from a very romantic form of approach. Actually, if you just go through the fundamentals of the universe, you will see that when we shift the molecular structure of our water, we're creating more coherence, therefore a higher level of interconnectivity through quantum entanglement, and therefore going beyond a high disruptive interferential wave field.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, yeah. But that reminded me that on one side, I did like when this interview you shared me about with the truth, the was your interview. Then what you said at the end, which was beautiful, like saying, okay, so then we will, it's not about what's happening outside. Okay, we have to be aware of everything because it's kind of all distracting, no? Even now this UAP, now is everything UAP, the ones that are involved in this extraterrestrial topic, which is incredibly revealing and deep. But it's for me like what it connects the most with is the topic of consciousness. But then that brings about looking again to yourself, no, like not get, because that's more information that brings you outside, like okay, now not this human species, now we have other species, and now that's going to be the exopolitics, and then and we will be all over again repeating the same thing, but just with more elements, but it's just more of the same. If you don't change the approach, which is just all that is happening on the outside, what does that have to do with you? Where do you stand with respect to all of that? Because I can imagine that for people, it's kind of interesting how the narrative has been changed so elegantly, I would say, that now the topic of ETs or UAP and all that extraterrestrials is completely looked and overlooked and sublooked at the same time, and nothing is getting out of that. I mean, it's kind of so weird what's happening with the topic, because it's been discussed in the full disclosure, and it's kind of like what's going to happen. I mean, it's just too much. I mean, and so there's a huge population that it's not even aware, that they don't want to understand, they don't want to see, they don't interested at all. The topic is being politicized, and then what's happening with that? I mean, and at the end, what's most important is w- w- what does that where do I stand with respect to me in regards to all of that? Because I don't want to get lost again in outer reference frames. I want to go back to myself and understand what that, if that really means something to me or not, and why does it mean something or not, or and yeah, it's kind of, and you made me also think about the movie The Arrival, because in The Arrival, the movie, you would see this thing of the language, of how this new language came to the person who knew about the topic of languages, not the physicist, but the linguistic person, which was a female on top of that. And so then, and she was the one who was getting the non-linear part of the loop. Like she would go to the future, go to the past, and have these retrocausal events which changed her perception of reality. And she was the one who was able to connect with this other species, while the physicist with his equations, and then he couldn't go beyond that. And so that touches deeply into the thing of consciousness. and also language and how these two are related. And also I wonder then, how is language for for, are they as, how can I say that? Because you would think that language is a tool for communication, which it is. But what this video we were talking about before is basically saying is that more than a tool of communication, it is a prompt that is establishing how the whole society will behave. And I'm wondering if that's always the case with every language. Like I can, because there are many types of language. You have, for instance, the language that animals speak, like dolphins, which are very bold languages, and they through the dynamics, the cymatics that they project. So what kind of language is that? Okay, geometry, okay, cymatics, but then do they control? Is that a tool of communication, or was that prompted into them in some social way, in a way that it keeps them being dolphins and behaving as they are? So how much of the dolphinity is auto-determined, and how much of their dolphinity is just prompted by their language, by their social and entourage, by their social interaction? And it's so interesting how this relationship between the one and the many, between the particular and the collective, which is something that taps very deeply into what I have been working on, the quantum of consciousness, because it really goes into that. It's a way of interpreting. That was incredible, because the way I got to that realization was what brought me to work with Nassim, and also with the Shintery experiments afterwards. It's kind of like it kind of opened this realm for me, like of extreme coincidences and synchronicities, and it was through language and trying to understand what I was saying when I say something also. No, it's interesting because when you talk in English, you have the word to be, but you don't make any distinction between to be here, I am, and I am here. So ser y estar, which is something that you could really differentiate in Spanish, ser y estar, yo soy o estoy, which is very different from in English, to be here and to be myself. And then in French, the same, has the same, not distinguish, they don't distinguish between both. And because I was working in Spanish and that's my native language, I could discern that difference, and that's where the quantum of consciousness also, it comes from language, from Spanish, basically, this distinction between ser y estar, and also coming from the fact that quantum mechanics and matter interaction has something incredible that goes on at unperceived by many, which is that what you see is the opposite of what you see. What something is in terms of colors is the opposite of what you're seeing. When you're seeing green, the object is not green, it's all but green, it's absorbed, it's complementary. So you're seeing the, so that thing, it's like space-time, the interaction, light matter interaction exchanges information in a way that it's always in terms of what it is lacking. So the whole spectrum of frequencies, because everything is vibration at the end, everything is vibration. You have confined vibration, which is what you would call matter, confined vibration. And because it is confined, there are vibrations, there are frequencies that are not sustainable because they interfere with each other and they cancel, and other ones sustain and interfere constructively, and they create this pattern, which is shape, which is the shape that you get. And it's mediated by shape also. And then you have free propagating vibration, and so you have that dialectic between confined vibration, which is matter, and you have free propagating vibration.
Hmm.
And this interaction between light and matter, it's basically determined by that, because the free propagating vibration will only interact with the confined vibration, which is matter, at certain frequencies, which are the frequencies of this, what would you say, the normal modes of vibration of this entity, this form that you just created. And so so think about light, the spectrum of all colors coming into this object, and this object only absorbing some of them and the rest reflecting them, like rejecting them. And me as an outer observer saying, okay, so this object is green and it's everything but green. So it's kind of working in terms of what it's lacking. It's kind of the information is not complete. It lacks a part.
This is super 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 important because like I always say that we were given one fourth of the information and we are to discover the three fourths to complete the four fourths. You know, like we were given the tree of life. It's not fully complete. We need to fully complete it into the fourth direction. This is embedded in the chakana. This is embedded in many encoded symbols throughout, you know, like human story of evolution. And the thing is that if you are lacking something, you know, you will, or the example, if you put a white sheet with a black dot, the eye will take you to the black dot and not to the whole white sheet, you know, which is that wholeness. No, you will focus in the lack of completion of white that it has. So this is embedded like really deep. So this is super important, what you were saying. And now it brings me to the importance of actually, you know, like again, the space, you know, focusing in the matter and not in the space, and the importance of, like, well, how these both correlate with one another. The thing is that if we, because I at some point came to the acknowledgement that it was very important, at least for me, to create a new alphabet.
Oh.
And I created a new alphabet based on 10 sounds. I call them 10 sounds. And to my surprise, when I start using, because, and then the 10 sounds, I relate them to each one of the letters of the alphabet, the 26 letter alphabet. So, of course, each sound repeats, well, has more than one
Yeah.
letter, you know,
They
like,
can feel the
exactly.
24. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I translate any word, which I actually, and even I have started translating quantum physics formulas into this alphabet because it works through sound. So then when I translate specific words, I came to the, like, to my surprise, the way that like the shape that each letter has, I will share it with you later.
Mhm.
I didn't do it on purpose. I was just feeling in, you know, like the
Mhm.
most harmonic relation to manifest those letters, to create those letters. And when I put the words together, I discovered that they create synodal waves, quadrangular waves, and triangular waves. Like, it's pure wavelength at different scales. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, wow, you know? So yeah, it was a huge surprise for me. So when you are writing something, it's just a wavelength. And now I have translated each letter in three forms, which would be the, like, let's say, the the normal way to say it. For instance, there is one that is ash. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, like simplifying it, it will only be ah, the vowel. And then simplifying it, it will be translated into what could be considered as Braille, yet not using the foundations of Braille itself, but through dots, which is kind of a Morse code. So
Yeah.
then I started speaking through that, and I tell you, like, the receptivity of the listener, it's way open. Why? And this also brings me to light language. I don't know if you have heard about light language, but you
Yeah.
know, like,
Mhm.
it's not that it's like a super language coming from, you know, like the highest spheres of consciousness. Yes, probably it is. But for, like, speaking of on these scientific terms, for me, the fact that your cognitive thinking cannot relate, or your conscious mind cannot relate those sounds to any word in a specific, like for instance, if you tell me house, I will immediately relate it to my house, to the house, blah, 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 to a whole story. But if I tell you, "Eikunwayaknia,"
What did you say?
yeah, perhaps even in the beginning, you will be like, what is she saying? But then after that, if I continue talking in this way, then you will just start receiving the frequencies, because the the level of purity from which I am coming from, which is no agenda, just emitting
Transmit.
information,
Yes.
that's the way in that mirror that you will start receiving it, and then we'll start mirroring. So I'm starting to do some, let's say, experiments with this form of language. And because I do believe that even from a scientific approach, it is so important, because even if you do some brain scan, you will see how the brain is reacting to those frequencies. What parts of the brain are illuminating, are more stimulated, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yes. It brings to the topic that they were also discussing in this video, between the word red and the redness, the quality of redness, which is not embedded in the word. Because if you see the word is just three letters, RED, it doesn't mean anything. It's just symbols. Where does the redness exist in that word? It's just, that's something I would like to understand, because okay, so I say there's a sound in red. I have there's it is a sound. Okay, it is not just the letter. Okay, if you see it, you recognize it, but you also associate it with a sound, the sound red. So what you're saying is that in that sound, if I had no past recognition of that sound, would the redness come in that experience, even though I have not that program in me? Do
well,
you like? And my second question would be: is that redness what you're trying to transmit to me? Let's say I don't understand. You come from a different galactic community, and you have this sound, and I have no idea what you're saying, because I don't understand the word red. It's not in my language, or not. But I see the sounds of it. I mean, you tell me there's red, and I okay. Did does the quality of redness comes with that word on its own, just because of the sound of it? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
yes,
It's
yes, yes, absolutely. Well, and this is where the experiment comes, because I have done that. For instance, I translate a code. And by code, I mean a geometry, a specific geometry with very specific pulsations, or, well, pulses, colors, vibrations, symbols, that if we see that holographically, they will create a relief, a surface that will, generate a very specific dynamic and correlation to your own electromagnetic field. So
okay.
I put a purpose on that. Then I do a frequency, you know, based on that. And by
Mhm.
frequency, I'm not forcefully meaning a language.
No,
Sometimes it's just sound.
yes, sound. Ah,
Yeah.
so you create sound with an intention. Let's say you want to transmit, I don't know, balance. Let's say I want to transmit the sensation of balance, and so I'll put this sound associated to that intention. Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yes. And then I nourish it with brain waves, depending that is in coherence with the purpose itself, of the frequency itself, you know, so, that
okay.
I'm emitting through my voice. So when I ask people, what did you perceive? There is always this, well, most of the time, like out of 10, let's say 9, the consistency of perceiving that very specific purpose, yet with different ways, like different ways of integrating itself.
Okay.
When I don't put any purpose at all, I just translate it and then do the frequency, like at least not from a state of awareness, like just
Yeah.
uh, reading the frequencies based on my perception of the code itself.
Yeah.
And by this, I just want to explain that I go through a process of meditation, when I'm just like fully transmitting as pure as I can, so that
Mhm.
other trains of thoughts are not present, so as
Yeah.
clear, as coherent as it might be. So when I do that, then every person will experience something different.
Mm.
And
They
it's
might take on their own print, because that's what you're.
yes, yes. And
Oh.
and another thing is that when I see people that is speaking, in light language, even people don't cannot intellectually understand or process the information in relation to like a point of comparison or a point of reference. There, it's this very, we can call it in a spiritual form, like a very soul to soul connection. And in a scientific way, it would be a high level of resonance, you know?
Hmm.
So this is why I say it will be outstanding. I could even think, because we have been talking about the Buga sphere, when
Yeah. Thanks
I
for bringing that out. That's exactly, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah,
it,
exactly.
it responds to frequency. And the thing is that perhaps we are giving, like, because we have been talking about, like the thinking the thinking process and so forth. But if we go now into terms of resonance, like, and therefore frequency, energy, and vibration, yes, we might relate because someone was chanting a mudra to the sphere and the sphere was responding to that.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
knew it. I told a friend that was going, this sphere functions through frequency, it responds, it will respond. And that the fact that I knew that, some people would say, "Oh yeah, because you were in a past lifetime," like what we will normally refer to. Yeah, but I can also attribute that to a high level of quantum entanglement to the field of that technology,
Exactly. Exactly.
without specifically identifying with it. So
Yes. Yes.
that's another aspect of it. But now, when it comes to, let's say, just I come and chant a mudra that I know what the mudra means. So it's something beautiful. So I'm going to chant it to the sphere. So the frequency the frequency that I will be emitting will be in high resonance, will be harmonics, will be emitting harmonics and so forth. So that's what I will be imprinting in the sphere. And then the sphere will give that feedback to me. So the thing about language, that and what you were mentioning, is that there are so many imprints in every word, that even though we're coming from a space like I love you, it has already so much interference that
Yes.
unless you're aware of that, you're interconnecting onto some extent all the egregor that has been
Yes.
put into that word, and that
Yes.
leads to alternate realities that are constructed based on that very same frequency that you're bringing into your reality through just one word.
Yeah, exactly. The egregor of the word, the egregor of the word. That's, yeah, yeah, yeah. So then how can you yeah. So how can you bypass that? Is there any language that you have, like the ones that you're working on, that you're translating? Um yeah, how can you liberated like from that egregor, like, because if it's just sound, then you don't associate it with any concept or
Uh,
image made yourself of that, because that's the thing, memory. And that's a lot, we're talking a lot without talking, mentioning him explicitly, but this is Jiddu Krishnamurti all the way, this philosopher, that he would say that mind is kind of like a trap, like we're always in the memory is not, as long as we stick up in memory, we will never be free. Like he's kind of like saying you're just responding from a default mode, from the default mode, which is what your memory brings up about you and what you think you have, what you think you are, the image that you have of yourself. And that's just, it's, we are talking about the same thing, language, egregor, because you have the egregor from the outside, but you also have your internal egregor, which is what you think of yourself. I would call it your yo, to yo, o sea, what you
yeah.
think you are, no? And that's your egregor. And and you think you're expressing yourself from yourself, and you're just expressing from your egregor, which is why it's so difficult to really connect with people, because it's just a bunch of egregors talking to each other and, and like, okay. And then you cannot understand why we go to war. It's very easily, it's not the people are fighting, it's just egregores all over the place.
Yes, yes, that is so accurate. So, so accurate.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it is, like when you want to create a new model, you don't focus on the last one. You just focus, like this famous physicist say, right? It's I don't recall his last
Einstein, was it Einstein that you cannot have a different result doing the same thing?
name. Yeah, that I think that's us Einstein. But there is another scientist that says that if you want to create a new model of reality, you just need to focus on it, not on the last
Oh,
one. Of course, he says it
okay.
in other words, but and for
Mhm.
me, this is like a key point, because I have been receiving more and more and more and more that we need to come together physically and create new structures of a society, of a culture. you
Mhm.
know a
Mhm.
lot of people can call it going off the grid. We don't forcibly need to go, like, off all technology devices and so forth, but just focusing on our energy on the systems that are today coherent to us. Like, for instance, and I'm saying this because imagine I can do the translation with the alphabet that I translated, yes, if and I can teach to other people. you know the thing is that as long as we are influenced by the frequency that it is emitted inherently through music, like 440 hertz, the pollution in water,
And the
the
radiation from.
radiation of the 5G and so forth, that will lead again progressively to like that will filter into these new systems, which is what has been happening. This is why all this courage uh, appears when people is trying to create a new model, and all of a sudden it collapses because they haven't taken this into consideration. So, like, focusing in actually, the main things that are influencing our form of perception, and then going beyond them, then, like, I can share this language, or start communicating through light language, which many people can just say that it's jibber jabber, like you're just like a little baby. you know
Uh-huh.
it doesn't matter, because you're expressing energy, and therefore you are connecting with a higher form of perception of your own energetic field. Okay, let me now express gratitude, and then you will express a different tone. Let me now express anger, and then you will express a different tone. Let me know. And now you are starting to, And perhaps we can practice this and then just truly acknowledging, because how many times you say, someone asks you, how are you? Good. Okay,
What
the frequency doesn't match the words.
what you mean? It doesn't. Yeah, it's not incarnating the experience.
Exactly, exactly, because even those are anchors in the form of communication, you
Exactly.
know. So it's just about experiencing. For me, we're in a stage of experience. We have always been. The thing is that now we are just aware of that. We're not afraid anymore of experiencing ourselves coming from new platforms, new models of reality. So I do
Mhm.
believe that we need to. This brings me to the Tower of the Babel Tower. It's like we really need to reshape our form of communication, because even just one example, the word family, it's related to the etymology. It's related to the word in Latin that it's connected to slavery. So you're
Oh,
saying slavery while you're talking about the people that you love the most, you
yeah.
know and that is a huge egregor. And yes, it influences. If you don't believe me, like, just
Yes.
watch the reality and all the family constellations that are needed to be done in order to transcend all those family programs, those slavery programs, or programs of enslavement. So
Yes.
enslavement.
Yes. 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 Um. Yeah. Well, this is very. Oh wow. You made me think then that if we need a different model, well, the thing is that I that brings about the topic we were discussing a little while ago, in which like these illuminated persons, they didn't, because it feels like if we create a new model trying to escape the old one, or well, of course, if you depart from the point of escaping, then that's the incorrect departure point, because that's not the one. You just want to create something, not to go against something else, but you're going to go forward and push forward this other possibility. So if you do that, then is that a way to transcend the old paradigm? Because I'm taking this image of this illuminated. They didn't escape. They went through. They integrated everything that was happening, and they were able to transcend that through integrating integration. And here, not disintegrating, integrating. Not disintegrating outside. It was integrating everything and then disintegrating it inside. No, and maybe the same thing has to be done in this paradigm shift that we want collectively, because I know that many people have tried to create communities of the grid or their own, and as you say, they go contaminated with the same things they came from, and it doesn't work at the end. I've seen many examples of that. And
Yeah.
you know and so it brings about the same question, like how do you reframe it, like in order to that's many people have asked me, why do you live in Mexico City? It's so polluted, so contaminated, so this and so that. Why? Because I say it's the same thing. You're just taking your troubles, your problems with you. I mean, if you don't solve that inside, you just take them to wherever you go. So the issue's never outside; it's always inside. So then, yeah, yeah, that brings a lot of things to think about.
Well,
You know.
let's just create a new, let's shape, how Nassim would say, let's shape a new humanity. Let's create
Yeah.
our own language. No, seriously, I do know that we will be going, like, a part of the evolution of language will be restoring a lot of, let's say, encoded writing.
Okay.
And let's say variations in the language. You can call it light language, you can call it, like a different transmission of the words. We can call it a bridge until we create a new language, or like we will just start connecting through frequent, like up to
Yes,
bringing
right.
it to an optimate state, our connection through frequencies on a location, like, and
Mhm.
cymatics and so forth, our plasma body, being capable to interact at different ways, because also through, like all of this, it's generating it influences a lot the field. So, and yeah, so for me, that's where we are heading to. How long will it take? Well, it depends. It's proportional to our level of detachment to the structures that, because if we think it will be too complicated, the same thing is with time. Okay, let's shift let's move from the Gregorian calendar. Yeah, let's do it. Wow, it's going to be super complicated because all humanity runs through that calendar. Who will begin? Tell me, who will begin? Well, perhaps the same crazy person that once began something and then created a whole new reality, a new structure of reality. So I know we will get there. I know we will. It already has begun. I normally, when I want to remove the imprint or the weight on the words that I use, I do very specific configurations in coordinates through the space memory network. You can call it like, um, let's say, unfolding from the holographic field,
Yeah.
like connecting with that hologram, and like anchoring very specific coordinates, which would be the same like connecting with very specific stars, because that's why the ancient ones would configure their reality. And even some people with a lot of power now, they configure their reality with very specific stars, like the Bebenian or fixed stars, because they know that they go beyond the algorithm by more complex forms of
Yes.
configuration. But that would be another topic. I don't want to keep you more than
Yeah.
we can. We can definitely do another call, which I will love, because we have
Yeah.
many to share and talk about. But I would love for you to share with people about a little bit about your school, Serendipia Science, so that they
Yeah.
can stay tuned. And
Yes, yes. Okay. So then, okay, so after my experience, so I was talking that in like 20 years ago, I had this during my PhD in physics. I was in Paris, living at the time in a very small department, as you have to live in Europe. And then I was working on concepts of quantum mechanics and light matter interaction, which is my mainstream physics expertise. And I got into this realization, which brought about a code. It's kind of a holographic or quantum code, which is it's kind of like a diagram. It's got four frames that when I connected these frames, it kind of it creates a double torus dynamic, which is a autoreferential frame. So that's why I call that an observer, because it kind of it and I understood that many years after. No, not at that moment I said, oh, this is clear, this is interesting. It creates this fluctuation. So these four frames connected create this fluctuation, an inner to outer and outer to inner fluctuation, which I related to the vacuum fluctuations at that time because that's the topic I was working on. And I left it. I'm telling you, this is 2004. And when many things happened, I finished my PhD. Then I did a huge amount of other works, and I did got married, blah blah blah, many things in between. And then I started working where I had a very life changing experience for me, which was like parteaguas in my life. That this was 2014, and that's when this code came about again, because I saw Nassim's work in the Doltor's work dynamics that he has, and I wanted to see what solution was that for what equation had described this solution, because I had the same solution but I didn't know the equation. And that's when I found Nassim's work, and that was a solution of a relativity equation, and I had come from quantum mechanics. So it was kind of strange to have, okay, so they have the same solution and this is two different perspectives, opposed, supposedly opposed perspective. And so that's how I got to work with him. And like I'm telling, I started collaborating 2014. Then 2017 I started formally working with the team through Amira Balbaker, which was her astrophysicist at the time. So what I'm trying to say is that many synchronicities started to unravel after the code. In fact, since I did the code, it's kind of like accelerating a huge amount of synchronicities, and that was called Serendipia because I was called Serendipity because of that. So my team of research in physics called me Serendipity. Oh, here she comes Serendipity again, and now she found that this by serendipity she just found another solution, and I was like,
Nice.
I just laughed because I was like, yeah, it was just coincidence. It was just a coincidence. So all these
How it
processes,
said.
yeah, and the same thing with the person I was working is and the heir of Jacobo Greenberg's experiments on laser mind interaction, which is Jose Luis Bueno Shin. I also got involved with them, and we started collaborating and doing experiments together. So everything was kind of like aligning in the direction, which was very serendipitous. And at the end, I understood what that code was about after all this process of 20 years working with Nassim. We're about to go to France, to move to France, and that's when I said, no, this is not longer resonating. Like the resonance was not sustaining any longer. And so I said, I want, my soul belongs to Latin America. I want to stay in Latin America. And so everything like brought about the moment in which I could like give birth to this project, which is called we call Serendipia Science, because that's the way it came. And many, if I explained how many things have been happening after that, it's incredible. And so what I want to share is the quantum of consciousness work, which is what's sustaining all of that, and the science of serendipity. So it's kind of this uh, in which you will see how the frame of the observer it's depicted in a way. It's the only frame I have seen that explains what an observer is in terms of this entanglement of reference frames. And it's interesting because once you entangle these frames, when once you see these frames and you relate and you connect them and you have this autoreferential frame of observation, you can see it connects directly physical reality with the psyche, with the psyche through language, but it's not stained. It kind of overpasses language, and it's really beautiful. And it connected work of Nassim with the work of Jacobo Greenberg. It connected me with many other teachings, with the I Ching, with other teachings from other cultures and things like that. So it's on the progress. The platform is coming. It's educational platform, scientific and developing of science of consciousness as well, because the idea is to be able to create consciousness technology through this as well. If we really understand how our own consciousness and unconscious, of course, and mostly unconscious, is creating this reality, is co-creating this reality, so that we can have a more a more connected
Hmm.
a more connected flow of information. And so in that sense, this platform will be called Serendipia Science. It's on its way. It's research, it's communication education. There will be classes on unified physics, classes on concepts of physics applied to consciousness and spirituality as well. And also Jacobo Greenberg's work, the synergic theory, is also going to be explained in this platform. And
Nice.
there will be courses, memberships, and well, that's all about to come in a couple of months. I hope that it will be very ready, like in 2 months. I am calculating. So
Oh,
yeah, everything left flow. So yeah, so I'm just following the serendipia flow, like, the serendipia flow that came through this. So yeah.
that's so exciting. So, so exciting. And I can definitely see some of my experiences in the acceleration of things once you use codes. So we can definitely talk about that next time because it's impressive. And I love that you say that, it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're the first person that I listen that, like mentions the acceleration of things through the codes. So yeah, it's like
Oh.
it brings a high level of coherence, within the cosmic clock and this clock. So we perceive it as acceleration, but it's actually the natural time.
Oh, you're just upgrading. You're just upgrading.
Yes, because yeah, yeah, and this is something that happens to me a lot, is like being ahead of time, in relation to this reality. And I
Yes.
feel like it's the work with through so many codes that you are, like you're coming from the cosmic time through the true time. And when you face this reality that is going slower, lower frequencies, therefore, the angular momentum is slower to set
Yes.
somehow, then it reflects. But yeah, I don't. Oh my, yeah, we could keep on talking like for hours and
Yeah.
hours. Well,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. I would
yeah,
love to. Yeah. For next next session.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah, I don't want to keep you, I know that you have things to do, so. But
Okay.
uh, please stay tuned to when Ines has her website ready and so forth. I will be sharing the description below this in the description below this video, and also I will be sharing it in my media so that people is aware that it has already began, and you can see everything related to the school, her school.
Yes.
uh, Before I thank you, are there any words that you want to say to the tribe, to the audience?
Oh my God. Okay. Uh, I know that there's a huge amount of information that we have shared here. And as I say, as everything that comes like from the outside, there are many things that I hope were useful, like that you can integrate, that are that really contribute to your inner experience, to your inner awareness and your inner discernment and trip, your inner voyage. And I'm looking forward just to keep, the conversation. And the only thing I can say, like, it would be stay truthful in order to be trustful. So you have to be like always, as long as much as you can, just yeah, like cleaning up a lot of space in the inside so that you can also accommodate many things outside. So clearing the space and following your inner voice. I would say that's the only thing I can say is just that. Just follow your inner voice. So
Thank
you have to clean that voice in order to see which one is yours. Which of all those voices inside is really yours. So that's the tricky
you.
part of this. That's the tricky part. Yeah, that's the tricky.
That's such a good point. Such a good point, and very profound, actually. Very, very profound, because indeed there can be many thoughts that at some point we might believe that they're ours, yet actually sometimes we're so sensible that we're picking it up from the field. So
Yes.
knowing ourselves, knowing thyself, is fundamental to actually, so that we are able to differentiate which voice, as you said, is ours and which one is not. And
Mm.
it's very this is very responsible, unlike how some streams could consider that we are, like putting it outside, and we are,
Mm.
like, that's yours, that's yours. Actually, you know, I will just finish with this for now. When you described how in the beginning they would read and research on the behavior of the black hole, which was just taking in consideration the information coming from the event horizon, this
Yes.
is precisely what humanity has come to. just taking into consideration the event horizon of our reality, the surface of our reality. So now, as science and the unified physics, and through the research that you and Nassim and William Brown, like, have gone through and shown, like, going into that other aspect of that black hole to actually connect with that information that resides within, which is fundamental to get the full spectrum. And so this is like a huge, not even invitation, just like an inner commitment to keep on in this inner path of remembrance, which is can be translated into an impeccable level of love, a coherent level of what we know as love,
Mm.
so that we love ourselves so much that we are capable to dive in and dive in and dive in and dive in,
Thank
because that's the most sublime adventure that we will get to experience. And for me, reality is now calling into, like, rising into a new reality is through embodiment, not through teachings only. We came from that.
Yes,
Now it's through embodiment. So yeah.
embody. Exactly. Love it. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. You just
Thank you. Yes.
did it beautifully. Thank you so much, Isa. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for this
much.
invitation.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. I love you.
Love you.
And,
Love to see you.
yeah. Thank
Keep in
you,
touch.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Your audience. Yeah.
And until next time,
Yeah.
who knows?
May Serendipia be with you.
Beautiful.